Welcome to EnTrench, a 21 Pilots podcast. Hey friends, as background to this intro clip, I just wanted to let you know at the Clancy tour, everyone who had general admission tickets got a wristband with their number on it. So I went up to the woman who was first in line and I interviewed her. Hello, what is your name?
I'm Jennifer St. James.
And how did you find 21 Pilots?
I found them about 8 years ago, and I became such a huge fan that I went to their first concert in 2022. I went and saw the Icy Tour, and I run a radio station here in Metro Detroit called Radio Cobra Detroit, and you can find us at radiocobradetroit.com. We play alternative music that is based out of a station that came from Windsor back in the 1990s, and we played a lot of alternative music. And when I found 21 Pilots, I found their music very, very cool, and I wanted to make sure we played them. So you can hear us play a lot of 21 Pilots and the material. My favorite song is Heathens.
Okay.
And my favorite album is Scaled and Icy. But I really do like the new Clancy album, and I'm looking forward to their show tonight.
Thank you so much. Hello, local dreamers. Welcome to EnTrench. My name is Anna, and this is episode 88, Legend. Make sure you listen to the song beforehand and are ready for an in-depth analysis of track 13 off Trench, the penultimate track. Thank you for being so patient with me because, number one, I've been spending April figuring out my next housing decision, so that's taken up a lot of my brain energy. And secondly, and more importantly, is this podcast is so important to me, and I wanted to make sure it had the time that it needed more than even neon gravestones, dare I say. So I'm really, really happy that I finally got here. I've been dying to be sitting exactly where I am right now, talking to you right now. So praise God for this time and this day. It is beautiful outside. The birds are out. So many people are outside and I'm in the courtyard, and it makes me so happy. If I was less socially anxious, maybe I'd even be recording outside, even amidst other people. But no, I'm definitely inside, but I have the windows open and I'm just so happy to be talking about Legend with you today. So this is going to be two halves to the podcast. The first half is what you're used to, which is the song analysis. And then the second half is going to be talking about my legend, because I've been wanting to do that ever since I started this podcast. And I can't believe I had the self-restraint to not talk about this person for this long. So I'm really, really excited I finally get to talk to you guys about my legend. So let's just get into the track right away. So the background here is Tyler's legend is his grandfather, who this song was written for, and that is Robert Joseph, who passed on March 17th, 2018. And for those of you who are curious, Robert is on the right-hand side of Vessel. When you look at that album, you can see Robert. So just wanted to put that out there. And so without further ado, let's dig into the song. The music, I really liked how it's funky. I just think it's a fun mix of some jazz elements and funk. And that feels very like vintage and nostalgic and reminiscent of a particular time period that I would imagine, especially given this is a generational family member. That makes a lot of sense to me. And it also feels like there's organ, or at least organ-esque tones going on, which is cool because I would imagine Christianity runs in the family. So even if not the point of that, it definitely reminds me of church as well. And so those two things together, I feel like set the stage for who I would imagine Robert to be. And then of course you have like the classic 21 Pilots ukulele and musical elements that really feel classic and feel like that word that is being used in this song for Robert. And then also just noted the muted brass. I'm assuming it's just trumpet, and then we hear the unmuted trumpet at the end, which we know Joshua plays. But also, again, I love how the song altogether was it just felt very vintage, and it felt very, like, I just felt like it was an ode to someone instead of just doing what they normally always do. And I really liked that it had its own little flavor compared to the other songs on this album, because I think that's exactly what it was supposed to do. So moving right in, there's not too many lyrics to this song, and they're all pretty straightforward, but it's so important to reflect on who we value and why. And I think a lot of times that just has a lot to say about what we spiritually value. So I think that's also what makes the song, though simple, very cool. So it starts with the chorus and says, "You were one of those classic ones traveling around the sun. You were one of those classic ones. I wish she knew you. You were one of those classic ones. Now everybody knows you were one of those classic ones." So classic, I just noted, can have so many connotations. I think about how things are classics, especially literature, which I love, are things that stand the test of time. They age well. They're universal. There's always meaning to glean from them. It's a touchstone that everyone can pull some sort of value from. In this case, a person who everyone can pull value from. And in that way, something being classic, when we use the slang like, oh, classic, it's worthy of remembrance, whether it's something that's nostalgic, whether it's something, again, that stands the test of time, like a piece of art. We bring it up again and again because we feel that it is deserving of the attention and the space that it takes up. And then also, when you think of it in a humorous context, it's something that's funny. That's classic, great joke. I love a pun. I think they're classic. And also just this idea that it's not just when something's funny, but the reason you say classic when something is funny is because it's like a dependable source of joy. It's not just that it's funny, but it's that it's something that without fail delivers, without fail is funny, or in other cases, like without fail it will bring value, etc. So I love that he's describing his grandfather as classic, because there's just so many layers to what that means. And I think when we think about people who we love who are no longer here, they fulfill all of those definitions and more. And I just think that's absolutely a lovely word usage there. So traveling around this sun, I like how this kind of goes big picture. This idea that we're zooming way out to the scope of the Earth traveling around the sun, and how this person didn't just live, but they were traveling around the sun. This idea that, like, in this person's memorability, they're also kind of larger than life. Something about them was so inspiring. And that's what's cool about this song, is it's so personal, but it's so broad at the same time. So even if you don't know Robert, you know someone who you have that same feeling of larger than life, of value and memorability and classicness with. And I think, literally, as we're broadening our perspective and zooming way out in this imagery, it's also this confidence in a spiritual sense that this person was beyond the world and maybe like really believed it and really lived that way. And I feel that a lot about my legend as well. So I just wanted to bring in some scripture here to emphasize this confidence in Christ we can have, of not just, stewarding what God has given us on earth, but really having that eternal perspective of knowing that no matter how or when or why we pass away, we are not defined even by the passing away, but rather we are beyond even death. We are beyond this world. So 1 John in chapter 4, verse 4 is talking about testing the spirits and emphasizes, little children, you are from God and have overcome them, for he who is in you is greater than he who is in the world. Just this idea, like because we are God's children, we have security that we are born of something greater than this world, that this world is not our final resting point. And then Ecclesiastes 12:7. This section is talking about remembering your Creator in your youth, but it's emphasizing for humanity how the dust returns to the earth as it was, and the spirit returns to God who gave it. So even as we take away our earthly selves and think beyond to our eternal selves, even then our spirit is still, it is entirely existing because of God. We're talking about money at my church right now and emphasizing how, even when you have money, even that is God's, it's not actually yours. And so this idea is like even crazier to me that not even your own being is yours, something that we give the most individual autonomy to. Even then, this thing that we physically control is not even our own. Even when you strip away the physical body, the soul is not even our own. The spirit returns to God who gave it. It's very humbling. And it does bring a great vantage point through which we can optimize the life that we're living spiritually for ourselves, for everyone that we know, and to give God glory. And then the other verse that I noted was Psalm 24:1. The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, the world and those who dwell therein. And that was actually only part of a sentence, but, again, emphasizing that everything is God's, period, no exceptions. And that gives us a lot of humility, even when it comes to our lives and when we think it should or shouldn't be our last day. Even then, God is the author. Even then, we are not able to snatch the pen away from him. And sometimes, I can overthink that, especially someone with health anxiety. Like, that's kind of terrifying that, there's really nothing I can do to prevent myself dying. Even though we like to believe that we have so much control, until we don't. And then he goes on to say, you're one of those classic ones, I wish she knew you. And this is referring to Jenna, his wife, and how his grandfather was already deteriorating a lot health-wise when Jenna came into the picture. And, of course, even after people have passed, there's still just the sadness of, you're never going to know them. You're never going to know them the way that I did in the flesh. But at the same time, you still do get to know them through stories, through recollections and memories. And this song, of course, is a fantastic springboard to really continue to give people the space and the memoir and the memorial that they deserve to occupy. Because in Christ, of course, we know that of course they're not dead, but they are very much alive in Christ even now. But yes, that's why moments like this are so cool, because, it's not every day that you are set up to be able to talk about someone who has passed. And so this is a really cool moment where we're literally given the prompt to talk about loved ones who have passed. So, of course, as I continue to talk about the song and talk about my own legend, I hope that you guys can feel that you can talk about your legends, and especially spiritually, that we can just use all of these wonderful, wonderful souls that God has brought back to himself to encourage one another in just getting through the exhaustion of a human life on earth, and really, looking to those who have run the race, who have finished the race well, and letting these people and these stories really continue to encourage us, especially when we are shrouded in despair or anxiety or doubt, that God is who he says he is and he fulfills his promises. And that's not just like a theory or a someday, but like he's quite genuinely already fulfilled his promises for these people. And of course, the emphasis here, now everybody knows you're one of those classic ones, because we are highlighting you and really giving you the time to be the center of attention. And then the post-chorus says, all right, you're a legend in my own mind, my middle name, my goodbye. You know, to be a legend, it's dedicating something to someone who you feel is valuable, who you feel is worth remembrance, similar to the idea of being classic. A legend is a story, or in this case, a person who is passed down, whether through generations or just between humans. And also this idea of a famous person, and how we have our own famous people that we think are worthy of note, that we want to share with everyone that we get to come across with in our life. And of course, Tyler had the personal tie of his grandfather's name, Robert, being his middle name. And I feel like my goodbye can also show, you know, not just that he had to say goodbye to his grandfather, but also this idea of like, if his grandfather was inherently a part of himself with his name, he had to say goodbye to a part of himself in a way. And I think that's what's so important about human life, that is so important to combat suicidal ideation, as we are people who are very passionate about promoting life against despair and mental health, is this idea that like no matter how well or little we knew someone, because I didn't know my legend nearly as much as Tyler knew his grandpa, people still have individual impact on your life if you knew them at all. Like, I feel like even if it was a stranger, like the fact that you could remember someone's face or name at all, even if you had minimal interaction with them, is so cool. It's so powerful how valuable God has made each and every single one of us to be. And just the idea that God lets us retain so many people across our lifetime that we've come across, even if only briefly, is such an ode to his character and the way that he breathes meaning unto everyone just because they are in his image, not because they do anything specific for us or with us, but, you know, just by existing, they have value. And just the ability to retain faces that I only saw once or twice in my life is just such evidence of God's Imago Dei in every single person. That's so cool to me. So I also just noted in Hebrews 11, which I did read in Neon Gravestones, if you want to go back and re-listen to Hebrews 11, or just pick up your Bible and pause and read it now. This is a great summary of the heroes of the faith. You know, legends are also kind of heroes. These people who exemplify something about faith really, really well. And Hebrews 11 goes through so many different people throughout the course of the Bible who exemplified faith for so many different reasons. And it's kind of like a really poetic summary of a lot of things that happened in the Bible, which is super cool. And it's cool to think that we now, in our modern day, add on to that list with these legends, whether we're writing songs about them or just speaking about them, retelling stories about them. These aren't just anyone, but a lot of times they are people who inspire us in our faith, who remind us of God's character and how even and especially in the face of death, God's character is what lasts more than anything else. So Hebrews 11 is like a really great guideline for how to meditate on heroes and legends that have stuck with us and why they've stuck with us. Verse 1, which is really the only verse outside of the chorus in the song, says, "You were here when I wrote this, but the masters and mixes will take too long to finish to show you. I'm sorry I did not visit, did not know how to take it, when your eyes did not know me like I know you." I just noted the masters and mixes took a long time. I don't think that's inherently a bad thing, but I think, it's so easy to take things for granted, and sometimes we can get really stuck on products and processes of wanting something to be worthy of a person we are creating something for or paying homage to. But at the end of the day, like, it really doesn't matter how you say something or why you say something. But I think what's most important is not you finding the perfect words or anything like that, but just that you're giving the person the remembrance and highlighting this person again. I think that matters more than anything. And Nuggets laying down on my laptop. Say hi. But I think that's really raw though and real, that life happens while we're focusing on what can end up feeling like little things maybe, or just a very different perspective on like what matters. But at the end of the day, like, we are human. Like, humans are gonna human, and there's really no shame in admitting that we are human. And then the second half, he apologizes for not visiting. And I think this is, another human process of feeling awkward, especially with death or end of life. Sometimes we don't know death is near, sometimes we do. And it's just one of those things. No one really teaches you how to handle it. And so it makes sense. Like, we don't really know how to cope with it very well at all, because it's not usually talked about enough or ever a lot of times. But I think there is value, especially as Christians, to keep in mind our mortality, not to, overthink or be super depressed, but just to optimize the time that God has given us that is never guaranteed. Just like so many things in life, while nice or fun or cool to aspire to, are never guaranteed. And I think that's super sobering about end of life. And too often, like I was kind of reading in Tuesdays with Maury that I read last month, this idea that we tend to not think about death until we're near the end, but there's actually so much value of living better if we are more aware of it sooner and more often. And thinking of my legend and maybe Robert as well, this idea that knowing the mortality as well, or knowing that you're nearing the end of life, can also be a way that maybe we see a little bit more of God's character and promises than we could have otherwise in our helplessness and our lack of control. But yeah, I think there's some sort of memory loss that happened, likely because he says, "Your eyes did not know me like I know you." At the same time, I think in any case, regardless of how our loved ones pass, there's this idea that the world kind of grows very narrow when you're dying or close to death, because you don't have the energy or capacity for anything. And it does remind me of that idea of the hymn that talks about the things of this world will grow dim in the light of his glory and grace. And I think nearing the end of life is a good example of, in that tunnel vision is where we really see the world grow dim. And it's actually not really even a bad thing, but like, how can we be more aligned with that prioritization nearing the end of life? Because we should have such a loose hold that it is kind of always dim, but we can get really caught up in the culture that wants us to do more and always, get more because you don't have enough and you're always lacking, and what you're actually lacking spiritually no one wants. It's just a weird cultural soup going on. But yeah, I noted he repeats the goodbye, and it kind of just feels like verbal processing at that point, you know. He didn't have much presence in person because he said, I'm sorry I did not visit. So it's kind of him just repeating goodbye as his way to make up for the absence of just having that space to literally reflect on you're gone, and I'm speaking to you directly throughout that process post-death. It's both a song about him, but also a song to him at the same time, and that part very much feels like it's more to him. And then we end with the outro. Then the day that it happened, I recorded this last bit. I look forward to having a lunch with you again. And I think death is always memorable. You know, for Tyler, it was the day that he recorded that last bit. For me, you know, I remember the death day. And I think that's because it will never feel like we had enough time with people. I don't think it will ever feel like we had enough time. And really, we didn't, because we were made for eternity. But that's also the joy here, is like, even when we are shocked because we never feel like we had enough time, we know that we have the joy of heaven, that will far surpass what feels like missed time on earth. And this feeling of missed time, lack of time, truncated time will only exist so far as we are on earth, and that will no longer be a tension or an angst come heaven. And I think that's pretty amazing, that the Lord really promises to wipe away every tear, and no longer let us be in pains that we have to deal with, because everyone passes at different times, right? Everyone's different ages, everyone has different life circumstances, different life lengths. It's just the way it is, and it's a huge piece of pain that, you know, we don't get to all die at once. Sometimes it feels like that would be easier. Yeah, I actually really related to this last bit, but yeah, I actually really related to the outro personally, because with my legend, whose name is Luke, I was going to tell him something about a story I was writing at the time, and how I'd already talked to him previously about how he was inspiring a character I was writing, but I was going to tell him this huge thing about his character, and I was going to send him a letter about it because he really wasn't on his phone anymore near the end of his life, and he passed before I got to send that note to him that I thought he would think was really cool. So I like to think that, you know, in these moments where we had missed timelines, whether it's Tyler and his grandpa or me and Luke, creatively, that they have the joy of having that knowledge now. I think that's really cool to consider. And so I really was touched, and I remember being very emotional hearing the song for the first time, because this last stanza was like exactly how I felt about Luke's passing, and this album came out in 2018, and Luke passed in 2017, so it was about exactly a year later, pretty much, when this album came out. And I was just shocked by how timely this song was, and how, yeah, everything just felt so timely. But to finish off with the song portion of this podcast, I just wanted to say, you know, our normalcy may be gone on earth as we think about this song as a whole, and people we've loved who've passed, but it's not gone in heaven. And again, this now, not yet. We have so much strain and tension where we are, but that strain and tension is temporary. And despite our strain and our tension and our pain, our grief, our anguish, our anger, and everything in between, we do still get to spend our earthly lives sharing our legends and their memories and their legacies and all of the reasons that make grief feel so heavy, because of how valuable and cool these people were and how much of an imprint they left on our lives. And instead of just grieving that, we also have the beauty and the option to not just grieve them, but continually share more and more about them and everything that we want to share with other people that we know and love. And especially when they don't know these legends that we love. So yeah, I love hearing more about Luke all the time from my family friends, especially now that I'm working at church with James, Luke's dad. It's been really cool to just continue to hear about Luke, who, I didn't know super well. However, we grew up as family friends, and I just thought his story, his life story, really did and does continue to inspire my faith and the reason that I live out my faith. As bittersweet as it can be to say, I would say from my own testimony, I don't know that I could have had as much of a spiritual impact from Luke had his story turned out any other way. I think his faith was powerful, and it was especially powerful because of what his life story became. And I think that is just all credit to God, and how even in the most unfair, devastating, heart-wrenching situations, God still gets the glory. Like, there's no reason there should be anything good that came out of Luke's life, but there was, and I'm sure there's a billion other joys from other people I don't know because of Luke, and that is proof to me that God exists. Like, how did all of this joy and faith come out of death? Like, it should not have, but it has, and it continues to, and now again I get to share about Luke once more. So yeah, so I'm going to shift into talking about Luke. So Luke Granger, one of the biggest things for me about Luke is he loved the color yellow, and he really made me love the color yellow. When I was really little, I loved the color yellow, and then I loved red for a long time because I loved Harry Potter, and Gryffindor was red. And then I really loved green for a while, and I still love green. But now, ever since Luke got diagnosed with his rare form of cancer in 2015, I really just witnessed his love for the color yellow, and it was so infectious that I became enamored with the color yellow. And ever since 2015, my favorite color has been the color yellow, and I think it will be until the end of my life, because it's not just a color that is bright and lovely. I just inherently think it's lovely. It's not even just a color that Luke loved, but it's a color that is so symbolic of God and God's character and God's hope that, me loving metaphors, there's no way I'm ever gonna love a color more than this. It represents Luke and God and all of these very crucial metaphors to my faith and the reason that I live the life that I do. And now it has a tie-in with Trench and 21 Pilots. The fact that legend exists on Trench and the color scheme is yellow was, to me, that was God. I was so gobsmacked by Trench existing. Sorry, I'm going all over the place, not exactly linearly. So Luke got diagnosed with cancer in 2015, and then Luke passed in 2017, and Trench came out in 2018, as all the fans know. And I was just so emotional. I was so emotional when Trench came out because it felt like Luke. It And then going to the multiple trench tours, and all that yellow, it was like, not only is God continuing to be God, but Luke is very much present here. And because of Christ, like, Luke's not gone. He's actually thriving and flourishing. And it was just such an emotional celebration to really see Yellow have this surge in the fandom and its moment for a couple years, because that was the past 3 years for me. And it was just so important and symbolic to me and emotional to me that everything was focusing on the color yellow because of Luke. So I just wanted to tell you about Luke's story, a lot of the most impactful moments for me spiritually from Luke's story that I think you guys would appreciate. So yeah, I don't know exactly what the cancer was called, but it's a very aggressive, fast-acting form of cancer that is, I think, exclusive to children. So Luke was diagnosed when he was 15 and he passed when he was 17. As background, our families grew up at church together. We grew up at the same church together, which I now work at. And Luke was younger than me, but we did go to Young Life camps together with our families and serve together. And one of the last Young Life memories I remember is actually in 2014, the year I got baptized by my dad up at the camp. And I remember Luke was up there serving with us, and we were bonding over the fact that we both played the flute. So that was cool. And I remember, this is so random, but he came into the dining hall where we were serving. He were frantically ran up to my brother and was like, have you seen one of my shoes? I lost one of my shoes. And it's just so silly. But that was just that was Luke, just this ball of energy and joy and chaos. But just so much fun and such a delight. And yeah, so of course, he had a horrible diagnosis and, such a challenging end of life his past couple years, but his faith did not grow dim at all. So prior to his terminal assessment, he did have to get one of his legs amputated. And yeah, it's been a while since I talked about this, but he had to get his leg amputated, and normally they will just mark which leg it is, right? To just make sure everyone's on the same page, very important procedural protocol. And so they, because they had to mark his leg, they asked if he wanted them to do anything specific on his leg before it got amputated. And he asked that they write Romans 8:18 on his leg. And Romans 8:18 says, "For I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing to the glory that will be revealed to us." And that kid was 15. And we were told the nurse had to go out in the hall because she started crying. But that was Luke. He was so rock steady in his faith, and even having his leg amputated was not going to deter him from knowing God's promises and proclaiming them to everyone around him. And Luke is very extroverted, and he was just class act at making friends with people all the time. He was really good at Rubik's Cubes. Like I said, he played the flute. He loved doing magic tricks, and he just loved making friends with people anywhere and everywhere he would go. And so, of course, near the end of his life, he made friends at his appointments in doctor's offices all the time. And not just making friends, but he always wanted to share about Jesus and share the gospel. He was so passionate about it, no matter what situation he was in or why he was in the situations he was in. And his end of life was not going to deter him from the faith that he had. And yeah, so he loved Young Life Camp. Like I said, we would go up there and we would serve together in our families. And so I think this was his last Young Life Camp he ever went to. I don't exactly know what year it was. I'm assuming either 2015 or 2016, but I could be wrong. Maybe it was 2017. There is this time near the end of a week of camp where a bunch of workers will go up, and it's called a cardboard testimony. So on one side, they will write who they were before Christ, and they'll flip it over and show everyone who they became after Christ. And so, people will write things like lost and then flip it over and it'll say found, or numbing the pain versus like healing the pain, like those types of things. And so Luke and all these other people went up one by one and did their cardboard testimony. And I believe Luke was near the end, or maybe was the last person. And by this time he already had his leg amputated. So of course everyone could see that literally when he was up there doing his testimony. And his parents were also in there, and he had not told them what he'd written down. And so he showed his testimony, and the before, it said broken on earth, which was so poignant with his leg. And then he flipped it over and it said made whole in heaven. And his resilience, just like, it gets me every single time. And that's such a huge reason that I even love 21 Pilots, is they are constantly touting resilience. And then something that I remember James telling us that really, really impacted me from the very end of Luke's life was near the end. Luke was very in and out of it, conscious, unconscious, and having a lot more brain fog because his body was just like shutting down. And so a lot of times James would be sleeping with him in his room because it was just like so not fun and uncomfortable for Luke. And there was one point where, I think Luke had like just woken up. It was maybe in the middle of the night. I don't know exactly what time of day it was actually. But basically Luke woke up and was like, Dad, I want to go home. And James thought he was, kind of out of it because he'd been out of it. And he was like, Bud, like, you're home. We are home right now. And he was like a little bit sassy, like, I know where I am, Dad. He was like, but I'm ready to go home. Yeah, just the way that he had so much hope and encouragement for his family, even throughout the physical trauma, really, that he had to go through. And yet he still was gently also like, I'm not forgetting my purpose, and I'm not forgetting the hope that I have and the marriage I have to Jesus, first and foremost. Which I think is just incredible. Because also keep in mind, this kid is only 17. And that always blew my mind how much composure and maturity he had for his age, and just this truly godly wisdom that God granted him, especially because of the brevity of his life. I just really believe that God did not waste his time at all with Luke, and it really showed in the strength of his faith because he had so much spiritually to give in only 17 years, and he gave everything that he could spiritually. So inspiring. And speaking of that, we actually just had a sermon this weekend where James spoke on money. I think I mentioned this. We're going through a money series right now. James actually brought up Luke as an example of how to be a good steward of money. And going back to the fact that Luke would make friends at appointments. He made friends with another man who was going through chemo at one of his appointments. This man was in his 50s, and this friend he made ended up passing away before Luke, and him and his wife, posthumously, his wife ended up sending Luke $10,000. And Luke's first reaction was, who could we give this money to? He had no desire to keep it, but he wanted to give it away. And so Luke actually has a Luke Legacy Fund that I've given money to over the years. And Luke put this money into what is now the Luke Legacy Fund, which funds kids being able to go to Young Life Camp and hear about Jesus for the first time. A lot of kids cannot afford it, and so there have been hundreds of kids who've been able to go to camp and hear about Jesus for the first time because of the sheer volume of money that has been donated to Luke's Legacy Fund, including the $10,000 that Luke received and put into his fund. Just this idea that, like, even when it comes to money, it's not our own, and Luke was very aware that everything he had, including his life, was not his own, and I think that's a big reason that he had the amount of faith that he did to be able to handle the losses as they came. Because really, in the end, he knew it was not going to be a loss. It was very much going to be a win and a victory. And so, yeah, I and my family got to go to Luke's memorial in 2017 at our church, and Luke actually helped plan it. So, of course, there was, emotional time where people were speaking, and his brother performed a song on the piano for him, which was incredible. And of course, there was, plenty of grief. But Luke also wanted to make sure there was joy too. And, we were inspired to pick up a Rubik's Cube or do something fun in honor of Luke at the same time, because Luke very much loved to laugh. And it was a really cool mix of processing emotions, but also just coming together to remember God's goodness through Luke's life. And it was a really cool service. And after the service, we all received like little notes in the mail that had Luke's face with one of his family's favorite quotes that he ever said on it. And I have since cut out this photo and quote, and it is still on my wall today. I always look at Luke, and it is just the biggest inspiration, and the joy and fluorescence of the color yellow. And Luke's quote is, "My situation is not ideal, but I know that if I do not survive, I get to go to heaven, and that's pretty ideal." And that sums up Luke's faith. He is such a legend. He's such an inspiration. And he's so much an inspiration that I have so much writing that I have done about Luke Ranger. And so I wanted to end my time reading about Luke for all of you. So first, I'm going to read some longer form / journal pieces. So basically, I had a blog all throughout college and through like 2020 very consistently. I really don't post on it anymore, but there's a ton of content, and the website itself is livingforhim818.wordpress.com, after Romans 8:18. The blog was not for Luke, but that verse was a great reminder why I live for God, so I added it to the URL with Luke in mind. But yeah, if you are curious, I will also link my blog, because there's a ton of content about mental health, not teenage angst, but like young 20s angst. So if you're going through anything like that, or just want to read about random like entertainment thoughts or read some of my poetry, you can go on there. I'm also going to link a playlist I made for Luke based on music he either liked or I thought reminded me of him and his character. So if you want to experience Luke through music, of course, Legend is there as well. But yeah, I figured the longer form writing would be a great like grief, empathy encapsulation for those of you in similar positions with people you're just wanting to continue to process and honor. And then I have 3 poems to also share at the end because I love poetry, and yeah, they're all about Luke. So here we go. So the first longest piece I wrote September 7th, 2017, and it is called The Beauty and Heartbreak of Death. So this is very raw writing the day after Luke passed. Ever since I heard of my dear family friend Luke's passing yesterday afternoon, I have been on the go. My mom told me, I cried a bit and prayed with some of my housemates. Then I headed right to work where the stress of 3 classes homework for today hit me, and the rest of the night was spent trying my best to focus on reading and writing whilst juggling student inquiries and my secretarial job, a scattered brain, and waves of emotion. I woke up today and had my back-to-back classes, and now I'm finally done and I'm free for a long weekend. I'm incredibly blessed to have Fridays off of class this semester. So now that I'm free, I have time to process and write this blog. Time to really consider and bring to God whatever the heck it is I'm feeling. Luke battled a rare and aggressive cancer for 2 long and hard years, so naturally it is relieving to know his pain and battle is over. I think about Luke's passing, and I'm struck by the thought, wow, God, thank you for allowing us this opportunity to choose you in our short lifetimes. Thank you, Father, that because of Jesus, we now get to come home to you when we die. I think of the blessings. I want to dwell on the blessings and the good. I'm surrounded by lovely souls who keep reminding me of the good. But honestly, God, I'm still incredibly sad. There are still tears streaming down my face, even though I know the ultimate outcome is beyond just good, beyond ideal, beyond the best we can possibly think of. Luke is home and Luke is whole in the place he truly belongs and now can exist in his true untainted being the way God intended him to be. What could be better than that? But our world is broken, and Luke's death is directly correlated to the pain and the brokenness that you and I have created. And that breaks my heart. The outcome is ultimately positive, and I know deep down it is good, but as one incredible friend alluded to in a simple text message, because I still live in the realm of brokenness, my heart is broken, I experience brokenness, and am not invincible to the pain. Therefore, sadness is completely natural. We only see dimly in the mirror right now, so it's going to hurt. I'm sure everyone reading this has experienced some kind of loss or deep sorrow. The hardest part is that you cannot plan for it, and everything else happening in your life at the time always seems to become trivial in a way. I have been to 3 funerals in my lifetime, the last one at least 7 years ago. I remember my grandpa's funeral because even though I had cried for my grandma's funeral was when I truly understood the weight of the situation. I distinctly recall standing with my family and watching his casket being lowered into the ground, and that's when the floodgates opened. He was really gone, he was not coming back, and for now at least, we were permanently separated. I recognized the finality of death. It hurts knowing Luke was only 17. It hurts knowing his parents and brothers have to spend the rest of their earthly lives without their youngest son and brother. It hurts that people cannot firsthand experience the joy, love, and witty jokes Luke had to offer the world. It hurts. But there's also comfort, and that comfort lies in eternity, Luke's peace, who God is, and God's promises, which all eternally outlast every possible pain you can think of in this scenario. Loss is hard, but it's also a great reminder of what is most important. People. That is why God's biggest mission for us is to go out and make disciples of every nation. If there is one thing you should care about other than me, God implies, It is people. And not just your best friend or your mom, but every person. Get to know as many people as possible because they are made in God's image too, despite their opinions and their lifestyle choices. Love on every person you meet, which I know Luke was incredibly skilled at, and don't forget that every breath is a second chance, as Switchfoot sings, and a gift. Luke had to undergo more than I could ever imagine over the last 2 years, and that was really difficult for everyone to watch. But Luke battled on the winning side. And ultimately, all I can say is, hallelujah, what a savior. As they say on earth, rest in peace, Luke. Not that you need the well wishes. I know God is so ecstatic to have you home. Party it up. A week later, I wanted to read part of this blog, Music Makes Me Soul Search. And this is also correlated to his playlist. So the lyric I started with is, "It's been a long day without you, my friend, and I'll tell you all about it when I see you again." So I started the blog talking about like a personal tie I had to the song previously, and then I bring in Luke. So I say, on top of those emotions, what was the main song throughout Luke's memorial? That's right, the same song. When I heard the first chords, my heart dropped a little, as if the significance wasn't already emotional for me. But we were really blessed by Luke Granger, the bright, hopeful, joyful, yellow-spirited Luke Granger that looked upward no matter what was in front of him. And then I wrote a blog December 1st, 2017 about grieving. And here's the section I wanted to read. To those that knew Luke, if you're anything like me, the main reason his passing is upsetting is likely because he truly was a joyful, loving soul. One could only imagine if he had been given a longer life, the even larger impact he could have had on others. But then I think about how much joy in life was packed into those 17 years, and the tremendous story his life spoke into those around him in such a short amount of time. It's incredibly inspiring. Who wouldn't wish to know someone like that? Sometimes I can't help but think the God I believe in, that Luke was able to bless everyone for a whole 17 years. His parents and brothers witnessed a giggling, courageous, witty, faithful soul for 17 years. What a blessing. And the God I believe in said, I'm going to take all you have, Luke, 17 years, and I'm going to use you for something great. People are going to flock to you and cry over you because of your steadfast faithfulness. You're going to teach your loved ones how to be strong in the face of adversity. And I really do think he did. So, yeah, now I'm going to read my poems, which I love so much. First one was August 15th, 2017. This is called Yellow Birthday, and I wrote this on Luke's birthday, the year that he passed. This was about 2 months before he passed. Yellow Birthday. Button up and button on. Today is Yellow Birthday. Did you hear the tears last night dripping into a yellow pool that juxtaposes sass and smiles with tired, aching, dry eyes? Yellow, sallow skin, help yourself to a piece of cake. Smile and reminisce into the lens, then drive through yellow-lit fields. A color grim and grateful, a color faint yet strong. On this dear yellow birthday, I'm reminded where I belong. And then exactly 1 year later, on Luke's 18th birthday, when he was no longer with us, I wrote Straw-Colored Hair. 1 year ago, you waved a faint hello to a woman in a blue dress with a yellow secret curled in the pocket of her lips, a secret furling around some crackly computer keys. 1 year ago, we rejoiced, for you, the boy with the straw-colored hair, gathered together in community to cry in quiet corners while Christ's love coated the air. A bigger picture squeezed out of your eye crinkles. We sobbed out laughs 1 year ago, trying to sew delicate silver linings that would come and go and later broke, mostly struck by an inevitable weight that we were never in control. A year later, there's a lingering sting, a dull ache for us, deep in the compartments of loss and pain, an absence which cannot be regained. In a timeless vein, you now sing and dance, while a different king reigns. You burn brighter than ever before, in the midst of the biggest picture. The woman in the blue dress sits down to the keys, reiterating a secret that already sat abundantly clear in the life, then the absence, of the boy with straw-colored hair. Lives have been saved since his role rested way up there. And then I just added at the bottom, happy 18th, Luke. I know you're experiencing the joy of a birthday party times 100 billion. And then this last poem is an encapsulation of my love and value of yellow that I still have to this day. I have so much yellow. So many people have bought me things that are yellow. I genuinely love all shades of yellow. Maybe not so much neon, because I feel like neon yellow tends to be a little more green than yellow. But yeah, I would say probably mustard is my favorite, but I also really like daisy yellow too. I really love all yellows, and I feel like luckily I have olive skin, so I feel like all yellows can go with my skin because I tan pretty easily. But anyway, this poem is literally called Why Do I Wear Yellow? And yeah, I love that there's no way for me to extricate Luke from the color yellow, and so just having an abundance of yellow in my life, like I will never lose Luke. I just think that's so beautiful. But again, like I said earlier, it's equal parts in association with Luke as it is in association with God. And so I really wanted to write this poem as an encapsulation of how yellow is basically just God to me, for so many reasons. And yeah, I'm known by all of my loved ones as someone with an abundance of yellow, and yeah. This is exactly why I wrote this poem. And, you know, compared to the other two poems, it's a lot less directly tied to Luke, but Luke is within the color itself, so he's absolutely still here. And I actually also read this poem for an audience a couple years ago, and it wasn't on Luke's birthday, but it was only like a couple days or a week after his birthday. And so I prefaced reading this poem to an audience with talking about Luke and how it was his birthday. So again, it very much has everything to do with Luke, even though he's not explicitly stated in this poem. Why do I wear yellow? Hope. Because I'm not chained to my wrongdoing anymore. Because my weak striving shows an everlasting strength that's not mine. I wear yellow because it makes everything and everyone else shine. This world is not my home, and my yellow sings out praise, since my rules and my man-made home would only give way to dreary and weary days. My yellow is a defiance to every grade, romantic interest, and piece of entertainment flung at me, as they will try and fail to fulfill me all the days of my life. They shout at me what to do, and my yellow quiets them in a hug and says, no, we don't have to. My yellow is loud and proud. It doesn't hide behind a cloud like the sun, such a huge, burning, weak, and flimsy being. It outlasts the natural world and puts to shame our technological advances. What does a little dinging box of monotony have to say when it faces the bright, blazing radiance of yellowness? It cracks and smacks and shatters into a loud cacophony of blind mutterings. Unlike yellow, which strings words into melodies, harmonies, and perfectly united symphonies. My yellow has name after name. Father, Counselor, all in all, Healer, Comforter, Lord, Savior. My yellow is the beginning and the end. It outlives the decaying bones and maggot-filled muscles of you and I. People flaunt yellow as fashion staples or happiness or paint it on as personality, but my yellow is not even my own. My yellow was given to me as a gift because I can't bring about such joy of my own accord. Because I'm lame and deaf. I'm a wicked walking hypocrite, a recovering perfectionist, and suddenly I become yellows. Yellow's me is a vessel, a body for bright hats, a mouthpiece for laughter and eye crinkles. Yellow's me has an attitude of awareness and orientation for others and a mustard-tinted lens that whispers, up. Yellow leads me beside still waters. Yellow sows tears and reaps joy, a joy reaper that peels the corners of my mouth up until I can only see a picture of what the world looks like sewed together by eternal things. Yellow has life, and life to the full, because even after this, that wild, raging, untamed yellow can never be explained. So I put my shirt on, and I tint my shades, and I see the world in a whole new way, just as yellow intended. And that, my friends, is what legend and what trench means to me. And that is a huge reason that I made this podcast. So thank you so much for listening. I can't believe we got here. I can't believe I only just told you about Luke and yellow. Yeah, regardless of what songs, what albums I love the most. I love that yellow lingers. I love that it is associated with the character I feel like is Jesus. I am so emotional every time yellow shows up in anything related to 21 Pilots because it is just my trifecta, Luke, 21 Pilots, and God, of just evidence that yellow is God to me. Like it is, man. I see God in everything that he makes, but if there's one color I see him the most in, it's obviously yellow. It has to be yellow. And I'm staring at so much yellow right now. I have so much yellow. It's one of my favorite interior design colors, as you can imagine. It is everywhere. And I have so many clothes that are yellow. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for hearing about Luke. Luke is phenomenal. Luke is such a Christ follower to emulate, and Luke is a legend, and I'm glad I got to share his legendariness with all of you. Please, again, feel free to share your legends. Feel free to share anything that ties your people, your legends to 21 Pilots, to anything about the band. Maybe it's something different from you. Maybe it's not yellow, but it's something else. But yeah, I just think it's so cool how God can create so much meaning that, even outside of the story Tyler and Josh are already telling, like just one color, God did so much with that for me in just strengthening my faith, strengthening my resilience, continuing to see the death loses every single time, even in just the ever-present yellow that pervades the storyline, because really it pervades my life, and it will continue to always pervade my life because God always pervades my life. Yeah, I think that's all I have to say, but truly, I can't it's so hard to explain how valuable this is to me. Yeah, go out there and love some people for Luke. Keep pressing into the joy that God has set before us as we look to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith. I think that's all I got for you today. I can't believe we're already nearing the end of Trench, but we're not there yet. And I look forward to continuing to finish out this album with you. I can't believe that when I started this podcast, Trench was the newest album, and now it's far from it. So I hope you continue to look forward to all of the analyses before us. There's still so many very wonderful, very important songs to me coming, but this one is extra special because just like 21 Pilots, Luke holds such a huge place for me of just the concept of faith and the concept of hope and how huge both of those concepts are to doing life with God. So this one was really, really special. And I'm being very redundant at this point, but thank you so much. Thank you so much for listening. People deserve to have their legacies live on, and I hope that it can be powerful. So I want to hear from you. You can email EnTrenchPodcast@gmail.com with a written account of your 21 Pilots story or your favorite memories you have related to the band. You can also reach out with an episode request if you want to analyze a song, video, or album with me. And if you'd like to contribute to the analysis we've already covered, you can send an email or message me on Instagram at EnTrench_pod. You can find EnTrench on Podbean, Verbal, Spotify, Apple Music, and Amazon Music. I look forward to hearing from you. Tune in next time for Leave the City. Thank you so much for listening, friends. Stay alive and remember, in Trench, you're not alone.